So we're on the internet, guys.
What is
You
going
know,
on? What is going on?
hey
So
friends.
hey, welcome everybody. Jumping into another conversation. We're excited to be here with you today. We invited our friend Mitch Tidwell to jump into conversation today, just talking a little bit about networks. That's one of the things that as we have grown as an organization and working with lots of leaders, I think that's been one of the things that we've seen a value in is creating networks. So we wanted to invite Mitch in to have this conversation. So Mitch, why don't you real quickly just introduce yourself for those people who don't know you, tell us where you're at, what you're doing, what you're involved in right now.
Yeah, Mitch Tidwell, live in Fort Worth, Texas. Work at the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention. I've been there. This is my 10th year, and have been kind of focusing on collegiate ministry, resourcing college ministries and churches for the past 5. And we have 2,700 affiliated churches that our organization is kind of tied to. And so my role is to specifically consult, to encourage, equip, kind of network those 2,700 churches. Obviously, don't work with every one of them. Not everyone's doing college ministry, but yeah. So that's kind of my role, and kind of as a there's kind of it's multifaceted, and some days I'm consulting with the ministry, some days maybe even doing a training. But I feel like for the most part, a lot of what I do is connecting people to each other. Is the big thing that I do, and just really trying to help people network around the state. And yeah, you kind of, I always just think the greatest resource that we have is each other and as other leaders. And so I feel like that's probably the best thing I could point people to is another leader.
Yeah, I know. Like one of the things that gets me excited within Elementum, because we're similar in that we're connected with ministries on a national scale. One of the things that always gets me excited is when I hear from one of the leaders that I'm working with that they were having a conversation with another ministry leader in a different part of the country, because there's just some good stuff that comes out of having connections with people who are peers, who are working in the same kind of context that you are, working in the same type of ministry. So here's maybe a question to start this conversation. Let's maybe define what when we're saying, if we're going to talk about networks, what do we mean when we're saying networks or networking?
Yeah. So I think a network is, I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately, because we call our college, we call it Roundup Network, which is just collegiate leaders in local churches, part of a Facebook group. They're part of a big event we do in May. Part of like helping resource or blogs, podcasts, like all those kind of things. And it's probably maybe less of a network and actually more of a collective of leaders. And that, typically sometimes networks are more like, hey, you're like maybe paying dues or you're affiliating or something like that. Roundup Network's not so much like that. But what we found is in Texas is there was not really any kind of like unofficial kind of informal network of church-based college leaders, at least that I was aware of. And so when we created this Roundup Network, it was more like we really wanted to bring these leaders together. It's not like they were, I mean, a lot of the folks that were a part of that are a part of Roundup Network are affiliated with the organization I work for, but there are a lot of churches that aren't, that are very involved in what we do, but are not affiliated with SBTC or even another denomination, altogether. So really, what kind of binds us together is just that commonality of being a church-based college leader, wanting to get to know others. And as far as that networking piece, I would define networking as, this is really off the cuff here, me defining this, but I would say it's just it's just having conversations and building relationships with people that are kind of in the same chair that you are, but in a different context. And that's what I would consider networking, which is like, honestly, for us, like we're going to have you guys will be at Roundup here May 12th to the 14th. There's going to be great sessions, great equipping, but like that networking piece is like, the most important piece. In fact, everybody always asks me with Roundup, they're like, "Hey, is there a theme for Roundup?" I'm like, "No, I hate themes." I mean, if you love themes, that's no worries. But like for me, the point every year is networking community. Like I just want people to get to know each other. Or, there'll be stuff on the stage, new topics and stuff. But the most important thing to me is that networking piece because that community is what is so crucial and so important
Yeah.
because I've just seen it so often. And you're not even asking this question, Ben, but I'm going on a rant now.
Do it.
Is that is that for like I have seen networking become just such a game changer for people in college ministries and young adult ministries because they get in their ministry. It's like they have that unconscious incompetence. They don't know what they don't know, but this is really exciting. We're doing this ministry. And then all of a sudden they realize that they suck at it. And then it's like, crap, maybe I'm not meant to do this. It's like, no, that's where elementum comes in. It's like, you don't suck. You just need to, we need to just kind of work on a few things and kind of give some training, a pathway because you're doing this alone. And so let's come together as a community network. And that's why I love what you guys do because you guys are connecting all these leaders together to realize, hey, we're all in this same boat and we're going to grow and learn. And it's kind of that they're learning by being involved in a community of other leaders. And for me, that's what I think really networking.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Networking
I think you hit it there, Mitch. I think it's the desire for a relationship, right?
Yep.
Because in a lot of ways, I probably push against even like an online network. I'm not sure how much of a relational component, because when I think of networks, I really think about kind of that relational component paired with, and you said this too, some type of commonality. It could be the type of ministry you do, the location that you're in, some overlap with other people, and there's desire to say, hey, let's develop a relationship together. Let's share stories. Let's have conversations. And I think you alluded to this well, and this is even going beyond the definition, Ben, is just like what we've seen over and over again within the college space is I feel like that there's just a lack of networks out there, right? And that's why what you guys are doing with the SBTC, what we're doing with Elementum, like there's just not a lot of spaces for people to connect with other people. One is because I think that college ministry is kind of low on the totem pole in terms of the hiring of a church. Usually you do senior pastor, worship pastor, 3 youth pastors, 2 admins, whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe we should do a college. And so a lot of these guys, they're the only ones in their city, right, that are doing college ministry, or maybe, somebody else, a second person. And so I think whenever there's an opportunity to be a part of Elementum or be at Roundup, like we're going to be there in a few weeks, that's the value of just like other people like me. There's commonality that overlaps us, whether it's passion or the type of ministry who we're targeting to, that drives that relationship aspect.
Absolutely, man. I was even thinking, like, I was sitting down in a coffee shop a couple days ago with a guy who is starting a residency program, and it's just like he's like, I just feel like we need to do this. And he's like, I've got a couple of young ladies that are going to jump on board. And I was like, well, what do you got planned? He's like, man, we're just going to build this thing as the plane's in the air kind of thing. Cause it's like, they've never been there. They've never done it, but he just feels convicted to do it. And I'm like, man, praise the Lord. Well, now, in my head, I'm thinking, hey, Chris Cummings, he was there like 1 year ago, like the guy, down at Coastal, and he put together residency. And so I'm going to connect those two guys because it's literally they're in the same, different contexts, but thinking along the same things. And I'm like, man, like what Chris could, you could go read books online, all that kind of stuff, but man, to connect him with Chris is going to be so invaluable because it's, he's been there, he's done it, he's kind of in the thick of it, and he may not have it all figured out, but there's some commonality and there's a relationship that'll likely be built through all that.
Yeah. That was fun. Even Ben was kind of alluding to this, of kind of the joy of when other leaders are connected to other leaders outside. Ben was sharing a story in our Slack channel about, we had Drew Dabbs on a couple of weeks ago talking about missional communities, and somebody from our tribe and that was a part of a group coaching call with Drew, made the initiation to make that relationship and say, hey, can I pick your brain a little bit with missional communities? And so you just kind of see those relationship webs that can happen, and the value that adds to you as being a leader, to have other people that you can rely on and go to.
Yeah. Man, I always feel like when those connections like really match and that's a resource, that just feels like I love that feeling. It's like you've done a job well done of connecting two people together to be a resource in a relationship,
Yeah.
and I love that. So that's good stuff.
Well, I think we hijacked your question, Ben. We went way off.
It's all good. I mean, I think this is something we're all obviously passionate about. Just one thing I want to add to that definition. I think, you look at 10 years ago, if I was to talk about networking, I think most people, this is prior. We have a better idea of it now because we're so normalized with the networking concept within social media. Whereas, I think 5-10 years ago, the primary image of it would be like the business cocktail party where you're, passing around business cards and you're trying to climb a ladder via the path of networking. But I think from a Christian perspective, you guys both mentioned the idea of relationships and connections, but there's also the significant benefit in my mind of the connecting with people who are outside your context gives you a bigger picture, a bigger taste of the kingdom of God, because it's so easy, especially when ministry is challenging, when leadership is challenging. It's so easy to get zoned in on the problem, that you miss the fact that there's the reality of your thing that you're working on, the trench that you're in is not the only thing that's going on. And so it's super refreshing, even if it's something that doesn't benefit, me locally here in Fargo, to hear, man, God's doing some really cool stuff down in Texas, or like something amazing. Got like 4 people came to faith in, wherever that's just gives you your faith in your heart, a reminder of, the good things that God's doing.
Absolutely, man.
So here's another question. I know most of us were kind of embedded in networks where we have some connections along those lines. But what would you say to someone who's coming to you? They're maybe small town, or they're not connected to any kind of network, but they want to see something happen. If they were saying, hey, where do I start? I want to network. I want to find some other people who are at peer level with me. What would you say to them?
Well, I think for me personally, I would probably, if they're on Facebook, I'd put them in our Roundup Network Facebook group, just so they can see. It's like easy first step of like, oh, okay, there's, other leaders in here that I can ask questions, I can talk to, those kind of things. I would do that. But then also for me is normally just getting in a conversation and just listening to who they are, listening to where they're at, listening to what are the wins in their ministry? What are the things that they're maybe struggling with? Because usually once I do that, then I can identify somebody that would be a good resource for them. And I think that's just that easy on road to begin networking is saying, here's this person out here doing ministry, alone. And then, where's kind of this pain point or somewhere and they're at, or something like that. And then connect them to somebody that I think would be a really good resource and a good conversation for them. And I've always found that people normally are pretty eager, at least I found in our tribe, like I feel like people are pretty eager to have those conversations and to be a resource to somebody else. So that's probably the first thing that I would do.
Yeah. I think about too. I think there's a temptation to network on a large scale, but I think that the strongest way a network can like develop is through a common heart. And I remember a friend talking to me about this because he developed like a worship leader network out in Portland, Oregon. And it became this huge community, but it started with 3 guys that were meeting together, that had a common heart. And then it was like, oh, hey, this guy's like us too, or this guy's like us too. And then they started slowly inviting people in, where I think sometimes there's a temptation to like, well, let's invite every college pastor that we know in the city, right? And just hope that something happens, which it can, that can be a good space. But if there's a craving for relationship, I would encourage people to say, okay, who are the 1 or 2 people that I really resonate with, that have kind of similar heart, and how do I cultivate a relationship with them first, and then have our eyes open to invite, because in a lot of ways that's what you did, Mitch, like even sharing the story of what's happening here in Texas. That first roundup was a small group of people. It was a pretty small, and it's just been more like, hey, you should be a part of this. You have a common heart like us too. And then all of a sudden we're getting people from, all over the country that are coming to roundup here in a few weeks.
Yeah, man. Like I think when I first took this spot, the roundup, it was called Collegiate Roundabout, and I think the year prior there was like maybe 8 leaders that were just sitting around a table, talking about college ministry. And that first year, I think we had like 25. And I'm not like, the point wasn't to, the point for me wasn't to try to grow a big ministry. I was trying to grow a big community, like in a rich, like healthy community. And I felt like each year it's like, I think we had 25 at Roundup. And I say Roundup is like this catalytic, like family reunion we have once a year, to where it's not the end all be all, but it's where family gets together, they get to catch up, they get to get resourced, and just kind of this catalytic. And what we saw is like over a year after year, just continuing to connect people in those relationships like that family just began to grow to the point that now in 5 years later that, our first year we had 25, and, this year I think we'll have probably like 300 folks that'll come and be a part of Roundup. And so part of that is just every year that network just really growing, expanding, and connecting more people together that feel like they're kind of a part of that tribe, to even that we've reached. And this is, I think, what's the cool thing is that, this year Roundup's going to be, we actually took Texas out of Roundup because we have people coming from outside of Texas, and we want it to feel more welcoming to people outside of Texas, because they're so hungry for networking and community among people that are doing what they're doing. And I think that's the key for us. It's like, man, we want to build a family of people that have a common mission, and that making disciples of college students, and even in different and various contexts and different ways, but they know that they're not in it alone. And man, that's just for me, that's just the biggest win out of all, my whole job. It's like, man, if there are collegiate leaders out there, pastors, ministers, residents, collegiate student leaders, whatever it is, that feel like there is a family out there that they belong to do ministry alongside. They feel welcome, they feel wanted, they feel resourced, they feel valued. Like, for me, that's because I feel like if you can get that, then it's going to produce healthy ministry. But anyways, that's kind of my take on all that. It's been fun to watch that kind of grow, but it's all built around it's not like hype, it's community. It's all community.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I think a couple things I think are so key in what you're saying there, Mitch. One is that it's part of what's made that succeed, I would say, is that you have a commonality of mission. Is saying, hey, we're all focused on this specific, college, young adult, we're church, primarily lots of church-based stuff. This is our context that we're in, that we have in common, and here's the mission that we have in common. And a network is going to be much more effective. One, if you have that, if you have a clear definition of what's the kind of boundaries, what makes you in or out of a network. Thinking in digital terms, in terms of like a computer network, really the main thing that you need is a connecting point to network to computers, and then a common language for them to communicate back and forth with. And if you have those, you can start, and those are like the only requirements to bring a computer into the network. Obviously, on a technical level, there's more that goes on, but
it's a good word.
I think that's really key. And so if I was talking to someone who was saying, hey, I want to start something, I love what you were saying about let's start at a small place. You don't have to start, like Andy was saying, you don't have to start with this huge thing. Start with the people who are already naturally connected to you. Another, I think, key thing there is, like I was saying, define what's the purpose of this thing. Is it solely, because there's benefits in networks where you're saying, hey, we're delivering some sort of content for you, we're here to learn together, versus a network where we're saying, hey, we're here to just get to know each other and support each other emotionally. Having some clarity around that, I think, is really helpful for people as they come in.
Yeah, and I think too, Ben, is what you're saying is sometimes the frustration with networks are when you come in with different expectations that has
Yeah.
never been clearly defined what it's for, and so if
Mhm.
somebody comes in and they're expecting training or they're expecting learning and you're hanging out getting to know each other, they can walk away frustrated. So I think that's a good word, Ben, of even clearly defining, okay, what is the purpose of this network? Why are we gathering
Mhm.
together? Is it for growing together and learning? Is it for praying together? Is it for encouraging one another? Like what are the primary purposes that drive this network forward?
Yeah.
Mhm. That's
It's
a good
good.
word.
Well, I'd love to hear even, so we've talked about the positives of networks. I
Mhm.
think it'd be good to even touch on, as you're thinking about networking, what are maybe obstacles or things that we need to be aware of that
Mhm.
could derail a network, that could,
Mhm.
just kind of make it go in a direction that we don't want it to go.
Yeah, it's a great question. We haven't had too much. I feel like we've round up too many hiccups on some of that, but I think what would be kind of a hiccup is that if you got to like, I feel like I don't know, yeah, I feel like you want to be as broad as you possibly can, um, to invite to get to cast a wide net. But also there needs to be, some elements. I mean, like for instance, Roundup is typically you're a church-based college leader. That's a commonality with a mission for like disciple making. So those are kind of like and to be kind of like mission minded. Like so, those are kind of the three. Those are kind of the three kind of core things that kind of make up Roundup. But I think probably not being. I don't know. Like I feel like if you get too, what am I trying to say here? I feel like if it's like too narrow, I guess, like in some of it's like I don't know, you just like start weeding people out, and so like that's what I always feel like the beauty of Roundup is because we have folks that are in there that are maybe like it one, maybe like a more like Calvinistic or like super kind of more reformed. You have some people that are less that way, and like I want to create room for all of those because I think there's room for that. Like there's room like having all. I feel like the more complexity there is, the richer the networking and the learning is because I want people to learn from all different kinds of people. So I think when it's like, I don't know, I think, and maybe if it's, I don't know, I just don't like being too black and white on some of that because it's like I want Roundup to be like a diamond that has just all these different facets to it that we can all learn from. There's some core things that we're in college ministry. Man, we love Jesus. We have a high view of Scripture. We're disciple making minded. We mission minded. Like those kind of things are like core, but how that's expressed is different. And so I don't know. I feel like if to become too, hey, y'all can tell I'm like thinking out loud with this. But it's like, if it's too narrow, I just like it just begins to kick people out, and everybody looks the
Yeah. Yeah.
same in the network. Like that's why I don't want everybody to look the same. I want folks, I want black folks that are doing ministry, and Hispanic folks, and white folks, and even more contemporary and traditional, and all those things. Because I think, man, that's just going to make for a richer network of people to learn from. And there's some people that if they're just kind of black and white, and if this doesn't, just agree with everything that I am, what I believe, they're going to jump out, and that's okay. But I just think, not being too kind of narrow in your, I don't know the right word for it,
Yeah.
but y'all get what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if in some ways I would call that what you're pointing to there as one of the primary, and this may be more of a sign than a danger, is like if you have a group of people that is uniform where they have everything, you're going, look at it's all this kind of person, you probably don't really have a network in the sense that we're talking about, where really the
Yeah.
heart of the network is there's this cross pollination. I like the
Yeah.
word that you use, just a level of complexity where you're coming in and having to wrestle with different things. I think one of
Mm-hmm.
the other danger that I see, and depending on how you structure a network system, can increase or decrease this as an issue. But if you get individuals or groups in the network that are trying to dominate, that can be a dangerous thing if you have people coming in with an agenda or with a significant platform where they then try to overwrite the other voices or talk over the other voices that are in the network. That really can kill a network quickly. And what'll happen is exactly what you're saying, what you were mentioning, Mitch, is that people will then just begin exiting it. I think that's one of the powerful things of a network, is that it tends to be more resilient than a single organization. I think there was read a book on like microchurch or missional church models, and by Neil Cole, and he was making the point, one of the questions that he would get asked frequently, because they have this whole network of several hundred, real small micro churches. He said, well, and almost all lay led, people who aren't professionally trained as pastors or anything, and they were kind of like, well, isn't theologically, if you don't have people who are theologically trained, isn't it more dangerous to have them, like they might go off the rails? And Neil Cole's answer, I thought, was like, man, I never thought about this. Great answer. He said, well, actually, it's significantly less dangerous, because if you have a group of 15 people and one person is taking them in a bad direction, that's 15 people, and they're connected in a network that can kind of come in and advise them. Whereas if you get a pastor who's seminary trained, pastoring a church of 400 people, and they're taking people in the wrong direction, they have a level of authority and power that is much harder to counter. Which I think that's true in a network. You get smaller cells or hubs that are taking place, and it's much easier for them to, it's much harder for the network at large to get corrupted, to that language.
That's good, man.
Well, I think we're at about the end of our time. So here's a question for you guys, because I know you two in particular are connected or aware of a lot of different networks. Maybe what are one or two other, groups or networks that you would want to plug and say, hey, if you're in this region or if you're doing this kind of ministry, you should be aware of this, for the people who are watching or listening?
I'd say for college leaders, I mean, if you're kind of east of the Mississippi Metro, and some of the stuff that they're doing, the Metro is mainly an event. There is a Facebook group and some stuff like that. I think they're going to become more of a robust, collegiate network for folks on kind of that side of the states. Another one, so I'd say that one. Obviously, you guys in Elementum are a great one. Just being intentional with coaching. I think. You do have the SALT network, which is that's more of like this church planning network, though, where it's like they're planning churches out, and that's kind of how their network. But those are good folks to just kind of keep an eye on, to watch kind of how they're doing things. You have more of like a real loose one. And again, this is really more of a collective, like collegiate collective, like being involved in some of those conversations in the Facebook group. That's very broad. But if you're in those, if you watch some of those conversations in there, you're going to get church-based and campus-based folks that are in there. But, there's probably somebody that, like, if you like kind of watch that you can kind of maybe chime in with, or maybe even contact to talk to. So I don't know. Those are kind of the ones that I think of that are college specific.
Yeah, those would be similar to mine as well. I think about every campus, another network of people who are just looking at the campuses that aren't being reached around the United States. I think that's a great network as well. But round up, obviously, what you guys are doing, Metro, Collegiate Collective, just a few of them. You got any to add, Ben, at all?
I mean, no campus left, similar to every campus. I mean, they're fairly loose affiliation. I don't even know what they have necessarily going on for events wise, but similar to what you're saying, Mitch, I think a lot of those are things you can, thanks to social media, you can get in Facebook groups and kind of keep a pulse, or at least be aware of, monitor some of the conversation that's going on, which will then maybe open some doorways or give you opportunities to jump in and connect with. If a collegiate collective is such a great Facebook group, it's just so much going on there. If you're looking to connect with people, you could go on that Facebook group, post, hey, I'm doing college young adult ministry in this city. Anyone want to connect? Odds are you're going to get some good responses on there.
Yep.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, fun.
Absolutely.
Well, we could probably talk about this for another 2 or 3 hours, but we're, like Ben said, we're up on our time. So Mitch, appreciate your time today. Appreciate the work
Yeah.
that you're doing in Texas and even beyond Texas. Appreciate just even your friendship with us at Elementum and the ways that we get to partner with you and support the work that you're doing as well. So appreciate you jumping on the conversation today.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's always a good time.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. Sounds
Have a
good.
great Easter, y'all.
Okay. We'll talk to you guys at a future Friday conversation.